Ladies and gentlemen. And did we get online, Nathan? Good, we're online. Welcome those of you online. Hope you had a good break. And those of you here as well. And you notice we got the Taos Tabernacle Choir Quartet back here today. Here's a good song that goes with what we've been talking about today, because you look at it and you say, it doesn't. Tomorrow doesn't sound very good, the way the world is working with all of this tyrannical agenda and that which is happening. And so we know who holds tomorrow, and that's what we will celebrate here. In just a moment as we sing. Before we do that, I got a few people come. You all just stand right there. Got a few people coming in still. Let me say the book's back there. Electricity book is back there. The rapid virus recovery. I didn't talk too much about that, but it really talks about the electrical function in our body, about the reduction, oxidation thing, oxidation stress, and all of that in obviously a much more scientific way. He's an MD, an MD and a JD. Put that together, and I guess you got problems. But he is a lawyer and a doctor. How's that? He was a heart surgeon and wrote these. This is his newest book. He's got a number of books out there, but they're out there, and it's 30% off. I think it comes to about $20. Does anybody? Yeah, $20. I did check on the internet. You won't find it cheaper. So if you want it, this is your time. And I'll get it online for you folks too, so that you can get that. And then one more thing before we sing, and that is, as I mentioned last night, we are taking a love offering for our conference. There's a box back there for those of you who are here. Everything goes to the building fund, and then those of you online, you can go to Taos, T-A-O-S, taosfbc.org, and there's a button that says Give Online. Anything that comes in this weekend will automatically go to the building fund here at Taos First Baptist Church, and so that we can carry on our ministry till Jesus comes. Come, Lord, quickly. Amen. Till Jesus comes. But whether he comes today, tomorrow, the day after that, I know who holds tomorrow, right? And that is, ladies and gentlemen, what we will sing to you.
From the
Amen. Our pianist was so excited, he wanted to keep on going. God bless you, musicians. Thank you for that. And that it really is, when we think of the messed up world that we live in, it is a joy to know that, hey, whatever tomorrow brings, we know who holds tomorrow. And in that, we rejoice. We got a new outline for you in Session 4, there we go, on the fossil fuel hoax. That outline's available for you there, or online as well. And, you know, the thinking all through last night and then today, the thinking is that God's Word reveals we live in an energized world, and we are energized people. And yet the world has rejected God's Word, and so it's going to come up with another philosophy. And that philosophy is we live in a world that cannot sustain us, and so there is the survival of the fittest, and we better, fight our way to the top and get there. And then you and I, being Christians, ought to be able to come and say, well, I got a different way of thinking. I got a different way of looking at it. I'm questioning the assumptions on the agenda that has been put out there. I want to go a different way. You know, we struggle with why do ideas which you and I look at and say, that idea really just doesn't hold water. Why is it making progress? Why are people adopting it? What's up with that? And I do think there is a little bit of a spiritual issue that goes on. Let's look at 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, I don't know, say beginning in verse 6, if I spell things correct. It says, yeah, here we go. Let me see if I need to be back a few verses. Speaking of the Antichrist, who opposeth and exalteth himself above all that is God, and he'll come sit in the temple showing himself to be God. I told you these things, Paul says, and now you know what withholdeth the Antichrist, that he might be revealed in his time. For the mystery of iniquity doth already work. This is prior to the time that the Antichrist comes about. There is a mystery of iniquity already at work. I would say if it was at work in Paul's day, there's no reason to believe that it's not still at work. So the mystery of iniquity works. He who now letteth will let until he be taken out of the way. This is not our verse-by-verse Bible study weekend, but if I was that, I would build a case to say this right here, he who now letteth, is actually Satan. Satan is letting things happen. Satan is behind it all. And he is going to do it until he be taken out of the way. And there will come a day in the future when Satan is taken out of the way. And then that wicked shall be revealed, whom the Lord shall consume with the brightness, even him who comes with the working of Satan and power, and signs and lying wonders, with all deceivableness of unrighteousness in them that perish, because they receive not the love of the truth, that they might be saved. And for this cause God shall send them a strong delusion. Now, let's just take this. This is actually talking about during the days of the Antichrist, that there will be a strong delusion. But there's almost a fundamental principle for life itself that comes in this, in that a strong delusion comes from those who receive not the love of the truth. You don't have to be in the last days to reject truth and put yourself under a delusion, right? Have you ever met someone who in some area of life, they were just delusional? And maybe you've met someone who is just delusional. But you certainly met people who, in that area, you kind of knew, don't talk to them. Don't bring up that subject. They're delusional on it. We don't talk about that, when she's present or when he's present. They're delusional. Now, why are they delusional? They're delusional because they receive not the love of the truth. If you don't follow the science, you'll follow the agenda, and you will become delusional. And so even though this speaks of the days of the Antichrist, it is just kind of a principle that God has put in the human mind and the human makeup, that if we reject truth, we're going to go for delusion. So why in the world would there be such a mass wholesale adoption, as it seems, that perhaps is a slight overstatement, but this adoption of a green agenda that really is so against the poor and so against the middle class and so against the survival of civilization as we know it? Why would our representatives come and say, let's kill the poor and close down our society? This sounds like a wonderful idea. All in favor, say aye. We would think, oh, you wouldn't do it. Well, you put it in the language of a Green New Deal or Green Agenda, and this is what we got. Now, let's move into the material for session 4, what I'm calling the fossil fuel hoax, and let's go to Proverbs chapter 24, verses 30 through 34, and here it is not really talking about fossil fuels. Maybe there's a scripture that is actually about fossil fuels. If so, I couldn't find it. Maybe there's one out there. But here is one about wisdom that I think is important for us to understand. You and I want to be wise people, right? And if we're not wise, according to the Bible, even before we read Proverbs, what happens to those who are not wise? They end up poor, sick, and dead. That's the paraphrase. Now let's see what it says here. The writer of the Proverbs says, I went by the field of the slothful and the vineyard of the man void of understanding. Okay, I just want to take that little phrase right there, the man void of understanding. Does anyone, if you never heard this passage before, well, let's just take a vote here, whether you've heard it before or not. How many of you, just after verse 30, I went by the field of the slothful and by the vineyard of the man void of understanding, how many of you are predicting a happy outcome to this text? Raise your hand. How many of you are predicting this is not going to go well? It turns out to be 100%. That this doesn't look like it's going to be good. A man void of understanding. Now, you and I think we have found how to be void of understanding. Our understanding department was all sold out. It was just empty. There was nothing there. You and I have found how that didn't turn out so good in certain areas of life, and we got some understanding, and we came along. I like the old saying that says, experience is what you get when you didn't get what you wanted. So, yeah, I got some experience. How was it? Well, it was an experience. I mean, I didn't get what I wanted, but boy, I learned some things. I'm not going to go down that road again. I'm not going to do this. We have all been void of understanding. We've been that man void of understanding, and yet we learn along the way, and we gain some understanding, and hopefully even this weekend helps us to understand our world better. This is a worldview weekend, if you will, understanding a biblical worldview. So I think that universally the man void of understanding is biblically condemned. This is yet another reason we could have a weekend on another worldview weekend that would have to do with questions, with education. How do we fill our minds with understanding? Wouldn't you agree there's kind of an educational crisis across America today? I know in New Mexico there's certainly a crisis. I think actually we got worse than Mississippi this year. That puts us, as a matter of fact, I saw one report that said we were 51st out of the 50 states. We even came in below Puerto Rico. I think it was math and science. And this is a state that has made much of its history and much of its economic impact from math, science, and energy. And yet we can't seem to train a generation of scientists or of thinkers, void of understanding. Now you can look at that and say, this doesn't spell well for the future. This doesn't bode well for the future. This is not good. So universally, the Bible condemns being a man void of understanding. Well, the good news is that you and I are not dependent upon the New Mexico public education system, are we? And no one is. Even if they have children in there or they are a child in there, they can still, read a book. You can grow in your understanding and you can get there. So here he goes. I go by the field of the slothful, the vineyard of the man understanding, and lo, it was all grown over with thorns. No surprise there, right? And nettles had covered the face thereof, and the stone wall thereof was broken down. I like that, the picture. You can almost see the painting of it, right? One of you artists ought to paint Proverbs 24:30. Maybe we have. But I learned just this year what a nettle was. It was an experience. Actually, I had known that I had these plants at a certain place up in my place up there. If anyone of you want to experience them, I have some. And I wear shorts a lot of times. In fact, like 80% of the time. And I notice every time I walk through there, my legs sting like there ain't no tomorrow. I'm thinking, are these the locusts from hell? What's going on here? What is that? And I thought it was another plant, but finally I figured out, okay, that's the plant. This is the one that it is. And so I just knew, okay, stay away from that plant. But I didn't know what it was until earlier this year. I got one of those apps that you take a picture and it tells you what it is. And it said, oh, this is stinging nettle. So again, we'll line up tonight and I'll be happy to explain that to anyone who would like. So here's the nettles that had covered the face thereof. So I don't know, at least it keeps the coyotes out, right? Maybe, I have no idea. So a bad picture in verse 31. It goes on in verse 32. Then I saw and considered it well and looked upon it and received instruction. Pretty good lesson sitting right out there. And I received instruction. And here is the instruction. Verse 33, yet a little sleep and a little slumber, a little folding of the hands to sleep. So shall thy poverty come as one that travaileth, and thy want as an armed man. Now, you probably, I would guess, that you've at least heard verse 33 some point in your life. Yet a little sleep, a little slumber, a little folding of the hands to sleep. As a matter of fact, Jedediah, you should memorize that verse. And when you want to do something and your mom and dad say, no, when we've been working too long, we're tired, you can say, yet a little sleep, yet a little slumber, a little folding of the hands to sleep. And you can sting them like stinging nettle with that verse. And what happens? So shall thy poverty come. Now, this last part's a little difficult to understand, but your poverty comes as one that traveleth. It's a word picture he's painting. You're just there with a little sleep, a little slumber, a little folding of the hands. Anybody home? Poverty comes and knocks at the door. And thy want, that is your poverty, your need, comes as an armed man. That is, want came and robbed you of the things that you had. It snuck up and it took that which is yours. Now, our goal is to come back up here to verse 30. Our goal is not to start the process. And the process is right here, the man void of understanding. So we want to know some things. And, one of the things that I would say about, I would say both this church here and the last church I pastored in Katy, where we have some of these wonderful members that were there, is that it was at least after a few years, maybe, It was a place where people came because they didn't want to have a void of understanding. They want to learn something. I know most people come to Taos First Baptist for the music. What is up with that laughter? Okay, so the music is not our big draw. But people who want to learn, and I often tell people this, they'll say, I'm looking for a church. And I say, well, if you want a church that is big on Bible study and really, intent on digging down into the heart of the Word, this is your place. And we do a lot of eating too. So if you like to eat, you like to learn, this is going to be your place. If you're not so much into eating and learning, probably you're not going to like it so much here. And so you and I think we don't want to be the man void of understanding. So we'll come together on a Saturday morning. I would suspect that very few churches across America are meeting today to learn about green agenda and fossil fuels, and met last night to talk about, I don't know how many churches are doing that, but my guess is one. And that it may be a long time before another church does it. It's not the common thing, but you and I are people who come together and say, I want to have some understanding. And I know you well enough to know that if it wasn't for sitting here today, you would be at home reading a book or researching or looking around and trying to figure out, because you're wanting to not be the person of understanding. So our goal here today is to say, okay, here we've been learning about this world full of energy. And I hear a lot about fossil fuels. So what I hear and the world, what is the truth about fossil fuels? How many of you have heard of fossil fuels? Just double checking, yes. Even in California, they've heard about them. So with that, let's come and look at this. Let's talk about where the idea fossil fuel came from. Why do we call it a fossil fuel? And wouldn't you just agree? Let's just take, you hear fossil fuels, and that's the idea that these fuels came from dead dinosaurs. I mean, even what's the gas station that's got the green dinosaur out there? Sinclair, thank you. Sinclair, you'll talk like you're speaking in tongues or something. Sinclair, they've got the dinosaur out there. That's its logo or mascot. Can a gas station have a mascot? I guess it can. You got Tigger or Teddy or somebody has a tiger. Exxon. Exxon, there it is. Yeah, they got the tiger. Does he have a name? I bet he does too. I don't know what it is, but... Oh, the dinosaur is called Dino. Anyway, back to the session. The idea that dinosaurs died, they rotted into oil, is pretty much the common understanding, because we call it fossil fuels, for one, and it sort of brings about this idea of fossil fuels. And dinosaurs died a long time ago, and there are not many dinosaurs dying today. And because not many dinosaurs are dying today, we're going to run out of oil, right? That's sort of the easy picture of and I think that's the picture that the world wants us to think, is that we only had a few dinosaurs. They died. You already put that dinosaur juice into your car, and we're about to run out of dinosaur juice. We're close to the end on it. That's what they want us to believe. And maybe some people actually believe it, but it's because they are a man void of understanding. When you begin to study the fossil fuels, we begin to see something else and what that means. Here, let me show you an article. I've given you a quote out of it because you can't read this. But this newspaper article came from 1977. This was one out of Scranton, Pennsylvania. Is Scranton, Pennsylvania where Joe Biden went up and had that fight against Big Bad John or somebody like? Remember that story he used to tell? I was in Scranton and anyway. He was born in Scranton, Pennsylvania. Oh, okay. Anyway, Corn pop, that's it. Thank you. Corn pop, yeah. Yeah, his old story about rolling up his sleeves and taking care of corn pop. Anyway, look it up. It's kind of a fun story. But it was the last time you had a backbone. You can delete that from the record. This was from 1977 out of Scranton, Pennsylvania. But I found the article in newspapers all across the country. And I just want to read you some of this. I know you can't see it, but natural gas shortage real, Schlesinger says. And says President Carter's top energy advisor, James Schlesinger, said Friday, the natural gas shortage is real and the United States will run out of oil and gas in the next 30 or 40 years. Okay. This is the top energy advisor to President Carter. The United States will run out of oil and gas in the next 30 or 40 years. Let's see, 77, 30 years would be 97, 40 years would be 07, right? This is 2022, and we still have oil and gas. He clearly was at least a little wrong. Schlesinger was asked in an interview with NBC Nightly News if the gas shortage is real or manufactured by gas producers for their own profit. The question, he says, let me stop right there. This is from UPI. Does UPI exist anymore? Might have been bought up into AP or Reuters or one of those. But UPI, the Newswire, this is their commentary here. They want to know if the gas shortage is real or manufactured by those gas producers for their own profit. They've given us two choices, haven't they? The big, greedy oil men who are just trying to get rich, they're trying to say it's a shortage, or it's really a shortage. Well, I think I'll go with really a shortage. The chief economic advisor, the president, says so. 30, 40 years will be run out. The question, he says, reflects a widespread view that if you have a problem, it must be the result of a conspiracy. Widespread view. Too many conspiracy theorists out there. They were against conspiracy theorists all the way back then. But he answered, with this winter weather, we were bound to be in trouble, irrespective of any suspicion about holding back. The shortage is real, and the United States will run out of oil and gas in the next 30, 40 years. We have a problem conserving our supplies. He called for, now they wouldn't do this today in the green agenda, but he called for switching from gas and oil to coal, which is more abundant, so we have a longer period of time to plan for the ultimate solution to the energy shortage. Coal, buy us a little time, he says. Schlesinger asked about Carter's view that nuclear power should be used only as a last resort. We're getting to the point that we must consider last resorts. If we are to get off imported oil, the only alternatives we have are coal and nuclear for the foreseeable future. Now, they have made advancements, obviously, in wind technology and solar technology since '77, but again, read that as saying we are at the point of last resort. This is where we got to be. We're about done. He said immediate deregulation of natural gas prices is a question that remains to be decided. Who would consider the range of deregulatory measures associated with components of a long-term natural gas policy? The single most important fact is that we will run out of oil and gas early in the 21st century, and we will have a severe supply problems in the 1980s on a worldwide basis, and we must begin now to plan for that. You remember those severe shortages in the 1980s? Oh, wait, there wasn't any severe shortages in the 1980s. I guess it's because the Carter administration planned for it. No, it's because the Carter administration was wrong. The supply shortages simply weren't there. Now, that idea, we're about to run out, has been given over and over and over again with just moving dates on the target. If you look now, I think that most people are saying about 2050 we're going to run out. So again, 30 or 40 years. It's always 30 or 40 years we're going to run out. We're going to run out in 30 or 40 years. And so this idea, again, comes. It's one of these things that is one of those kind of everybody knows we're going to run out in 30 or 40 years, right? Everybody knows. And and also everybody knows that, as I mentioned at the beginning, that fossil fuels, which are oil, coal, and natural gas, everybody knows where they come from. They come from dinosaur juice. This is what it is. Decomposed dinosaurs made oil. In fact, here's a few statements. Well, here is a statement for you. It says, fossil fuels are formed from the decomposition of buried carbon-based organisms that died millions of years ago. That's from Fossil Fuels and Climate Change, the facts. Okay, that's where this natural gas came from, dinosaurs that died millions of years ago. Now, let me just stop right there. Have any of you heard a statement like that? Fossil fuels came from dead dinosaurs millions of years ago. Immediately, the Christian ought to say, wait a minute. I have a problem with the millions of years ago, for one. If you're a young earth creationist, then you immediately set yourself against the whole fossil fuel hoax that this is where it came from these millions of years ago. Because you, as a young earth creationist, would say, well, we didn't have millions of years ago when the dinosaurs were around. The dinosaurs were around, maybe 5,000 to 6,000 years ago, 4,500 years ago, and they died. But that's, the manner in which they died and all that. I don't think it made enough dinosaur juice for all this. And so you've got the problems. And I think that every Christian, every young earth Christian ought to reject the fossil fuel line dead on arrival. It really doesn't work unless you want to talk about the millions of years ago. That one just doesn't fly in my boat. Every young earth creationist ought to reject it. But I am convinced that every scientist also ought to reject it. If you're a real scientist and you hear that fossil fuels are formed by the decomposition of buried carbon-based organisms that died millions of years ago, a scientist ought to say, where'd you come up with that? Can we test that? Is there any evidence? Okay, we can't test it, but we got a model. There's your model. Is there any evidence to go with it whatsoever? And they find, no, but a parrot said it. Well, that one's a cracker. And we took it. And we repeat it over and over, and it begins to be the truth, right? Now, oil wells on average today, I believe, go down to about 6,000 feet. So you dig a hole in the ground, 6,000 feet, and you bring up oil. Where do you find fossils? I think I might be getting ahead of myself here somewhere, but fossils are found on average anywhere from 0 to 7 feet. 6,000 is a long way for that dinosaur juice to go down. And those who question the assumptions ought to say fossil fuels, millions of years ago, was our Earth, remember 6,000 feet is more than a mile. Was our Earth more than a mile smaller, that's where they lived down there, and then they got covered up by a mile of something over these millions and millions of years? How in the world did this even begin to happen? And it really is a scenario that I suspect the scientists really have to, the agendaists, really have to come and say, please don't ask questions about this because we'll look silly. There is no way we can support this idea that there was enough dinosaur juice from these rotting dinosaurs a mile deep down into the earth that this began to take place. And anyone, again, who questions the assumptions would look at this and say, something's not adding up here. What's the issue? Now, when you go back to it, the fossil fuels have been known for a long time. I mean, the ancients knew about coal, and they knew about natural gas that you could light. They knew you could light coal, and you could heat your houses and all this kind of stuff. Really back almost as far as we have any kind of record or evidence archaeologically, we can tell they knew about fossil fuels, especially the coal and the natural gas. They figured these things out way back there. And so even in the 1500s, you can find that they were calling coal, oil, and natural gas. Now, remember that there is still today, and in many places, 100 years ago, there was a lot of oil really on the surface level. Remember, this is a story of a man named Jed. Yeah, and yeah. Texas tea, yes. He shot his gun and, well, that doesn't happen in very many places. It did happen in a few places, even in the United States, that you had oil, surface level oil, and that had been there back through ancient times, that there were surface level. So they knew about oil, they knew about natural gas, they knew about coal, they knew that these made good fuels and that they would use these for fuels and various things that they needed to take. And so even in the 1500s, they were using the term fossil fuels. Now, were they saying in the 1500s, these came from rotting dinosaurs? They actually weren't saying that at all when they talked about fossil fuels. Let me stop before I tell you what they were talking about. I saw a video of some straight shooting chum. I don't know who he was, but he was kind of a cowboy oilman type, and I sort of liked him. And he was saying, he was saying what I was saying, that oil didn't come from a dinosaur. What a ridiculous idea to think the oil came from a dinosaur. And he got that right. And then he said, I'll tell you where the term came from. He said, this goes back to the Schlesinger article a little bit, he said back in the early days of oil was so abundant that oil producers knew they could never charge enough for it unless they got you to believing that there's a shortage of it. And so he said they began to call it fossil fuels and say it came from a dinosaur so that they could sell it for a higher price. This is the last court we've got right here, and a supply and demand thing. Basically, he said the supply was so abundant that it wasn't worth producing for them, so they had to give a hoax that the supply was lower. Now, I took that for a while because I didn't know any other plan, and I thought, okay, well, that's what happened. But then I found out, well, in the 1500s, they called it fossil fuels. So it wasn't, who was, J.P. Getty or who's the Standard Oil guy, Rockefeller? It wasn't Getty and Rockefeller who said, what are we going to do? We're never going to become billionaires if we don't, hoax these people that it's about to go away. They didn't come up with the term fossil fuel. It was used, again, at least going back to the 1500s. And when you actually look at the word fossil, you and I use the word fossil today as the dead animal that got stuck in a rock and he left his fingerprint there, right? But originally, the term did not mean that. It came from an Italian word, and I'm sure prior to that, a Latin word, the Italian word fossile, which meant any material extracted from the Earth's crust. Oh. So fossil fuel means you had to get it out of the earth. Fossile, out of the Earth's crust. It has nothing to do with dinosaurs or fossils. The term fossil fuel, here's what the Oxford English Dictionary says, and that's the premier English dictionary. It's if you look up fossil, one of the meanings is this: obtained by digging. That's fossil. Anything obtained by digging, found buried in the earth, now chiefly of fuels and other materials occurring naturally in underground deposits. So fossil is from the Latin or from the Italian, you dig it up. This is a fuel that you dig up. Not a fuel that came from dinosaurs, but a fuel that you dig up. Now that kind of brings a new understanding to fossil fuels. Okay, so I don't have to depend on more dinosaurs dying in order to bring this about. And I always kind of wondered why only dinosaurs turned into bubbling crude Texas tea. Why is it only dinosaurs? Why didn't old goats die and turn into people. Been a lot of people die. Why didn't they turn into oil? What's up with this? There's always been some suspicion there. So the term fossil fuel there's really not any kind of conspiracy here that we got to raise the price, or there's not any kind of science that says this comes. It's the term that has always been used of any fuel that you would dig up. So if you go back to the 1500s and you burn a tree, that's not a fossil fuel. That's a fuel, but it's not a fossil fuel. Or you go down to that bubbling crude and you get it, or you find some coal chunk and you stick that in your stove and you burn that. Well, all of a sudden that's a fossil fuel. Why? Because I dug it up. That's why, fossil. And so we should always picture in our mind, when we hear fossil fuels, we should hear something like dug up fuels. Fuels that came out of the ground. That is the meaning of fossil fuel. It's amazing how you shall know the truth and the truth shall make you free. You come to the point of saying, now I know what the word means. Okay, it means dug up. I'm good with that. Here's a fuel that is dug up. So we can call them dug up fuels. I sometimes hear in the outline anyway, I'm calling them natural fuels. I suppose that that's not the best term, because electricity is natural. Just about every fuel we've got, if not every fuel we've got, is natural. But these are natural in the earth. There they are down there. And so a fossil fuel is from the earth. It is a carbon-based fuel. And according to Wikipedia, the source for all things true, Wikipedia says carbon-based fuel is any fuel principally from the oxidation or burning of carbon. Okay, I don't know what all that means, but I do know that carbon was on that table of elements. That carbon is this natural substance, and when you burn carbon, that's fossil fuel. And more specifically, oil, natural gas, and coal are hydrocarbons, which is hydrogen and carbon coming together make hydrocarbons, and that's called oil. Hydrocarbons don't have anything to do with dead dinosaurs. Hydrocarbons are a natural, two natural elements of the earth coming together, just kind of like, hydrogen and oxygen partner up, and they make it. Now, so here we have these elements, hydrogen and carbon, and our premise was that on the very first day, God created those. God created the heaven and the earth. He created the periodic table. He created everything, all the elements, and then he energized it and whatnot. So that means oil, a hydrocarbon, or natural gas or coal, was really the material of it was created on the first day. Hydrogen, carbon. There they are on the first day. And then he put electrons in them, and those electrons caused some of the hydrogen to say, hey, carbon, we're having a party. Why don't you come over? We'll hook up and have some good times. And then you got hydrocarbons, and therefore oil. Here's what I'm convinced of. If you went back to the Garden of Eden and you dug an oil well, you would get oil. No dinosaurs have yet died, but you would have oil. That the oil is a natural byproduct of having hydrogen and carbon and putting it in the right place in the right conditions. You're going to end up with oil, and that it's this natural from the beginning type of issue. Now, how rare is it? Well, actually, carbon is the 15th most abundant element on Earth. Remember, we had 118 on the chart there, and 113 of them are more rare than carbon, especially in the Earth's crust. And not only that, but if you take the universe as a whole, it is the 4th most abundant element in the universe, carbon. Now, therefore, it's beginning to get a little harder to build this case that, man, we are going to run out of oil because we ran out of dinosaurs. Wait a minute, oil is carbon and it's hydrogen and come together, and we got lots of carbon and we've got lots of hydrogen. In fact, there's only 3 things we have more of carbon, and that's hydrogen. So carbon and hydrogen, we got so much of it that the universe is not going to run out of it. The world is not going to run out of it. And with that, then, you say, okay, well, how did this hydrogen and carbon come into hydrocarbons and make oil or natural gas or coal, which are all related to each other, obviously. So how did these fuels come about? Remember in Fiddler on the Roof when the rabbi is talking about all his traditions? And he says, we have a tradition. When we pray, we put on a prayer shawl. And, he talks about the prayer shawl. And says, why do we do this? I'll tell you. I don't know. Now, a lot of traditions we gain. Oh, the truth is, I don't know. This is just what we do. We do it. That's why. I don't know where it came from. How did carbon and hydrogen come together and make oil, a mile down in the earth? I don't know. But guess what? Nobody else does either. Obviously, there are people who know more than I do about it, and they could probably give some explanations to it and begin to work on that and to begin to give some theories. But really the truth is, it took place a mile down in the earth, and we don't really even know what happens a mile down in the earth. We have these speculations about the core of the earth and molten core and all the various layers of the earth down there, but we never drew a core sample, we don't really know. I don't know what the deepest well is. I probably should have looked it up. You're from Houston, do you know?
6 miles. There's one drilled in Russia. That's really deep.
Oh, yeah. And then you got to determine, do you measure the part that goes through the ocean water as... That's not really drilling. That's not fair. So what is? It's not. It's certainly only a teensy tiny bit down into the ground in the whole scheme of things when you look at it. Remember the Titanic, the movie, and they're out there and they shoot the flare up in the sky, calling for help. Shoot this, and the camera kind of pans back, and you see this little sparkler go. The light might look like it went way up there from your perspective, but you back up in the whole Atlantic Ocean, and that wasn't much of a signal that's given there. Nobody's going to see it. So that's where we are on digging deep and what's going on under the earth. We can't even figure out everything that's going on the surface of the earth, let alone that which is going on under the surface of the earth, even under the oceans. There's so much mystery there. So I think that I would be suspicious. I would be interested in hearing, but I would be suspicious of anyone who says this is absolutely what happens down in the core of the earth. We know these things. Too many times we get kind of confident in the theory that we have in what may, but the truth is we don't know. Could it be that a mile down below the earth that conditions are just right, that the earth is actually producing oil as we speak? That hydrogen and carbon are coming together to make their molecules, and there's a production of oil even now. There have been there's a number of studies that have been done to show that hydrocarbons are, I want to get the word right here, somebody pronounce that. Abiotically, I got it. Abiotically produced. Okay, I think you can figure out abiotically because it's Greek. Bios is life, biology, all that. Put an A in front of it in Greek, and what's it do? Cancels it out. Hydrocarbons not produced with anything biological. Go back up to the standard definition of hydrocarbon fuels, and they are rotting corpses, rotting biology stuff, and yet the science is beginning to say, oh, wait, we were wrong on that. It's actually not. That's not what brings about hydrocarbons. There's some other things that perhaps bring about hydrocarbons. Here's a researcher from Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory. I just put that to say, this is no buffoon from Taos trying to research a few things and come up with some things, but at the Lawrence Livermore Labs, he says this: we don't say that higher hydrocarbons actually occur under realistic dirty earth mantle conditions, but we say that the pressures and temperatures alone are right for it to happen. Now, let me translate that for you. We don't know if the earth is actually producing hydrocarbons, but we know that the environment's right. We know that all the ingredients are there. Could it happen? We know that this is not an impossibility for it to happen, that maybe the earth, which is energized, and I would say energized by God to sustain life as we know it all the way until the Lord comes and decides to do no more with it, all the way unto the end. So wouldn't it make sense that the Lord would provide a source of cheap fuel, easy for us, and he would keep it coming and keep it going in there? Tonight, if we go, some of you want to go look at the stars. If we go look at the stars, maybe, I think it's too low in the horizon. We might see Aquarius, the constellation Aquarius. I think it's way down there, so you might have to get a ladder. But Aquarius, remember, that's that constellation where he's pouring out the water bucket and sort of, giving, in our case, we'll just say he's giving fuel, pouring out fuel there. The life-giving sustenance is pouring out. Could it be that God really is saying, I created a world that is going to be an energy manufacturer for the people who have dominion on this earth? All they got to do is figure out how to dig it out, because it's fossil fuel. You got to dig for it to get it out. I think the science works through that. Now, let's come and give this a little bit of a biblical perspective. Let me back up, just in case you fell asleep this morning already. Let me back up, say, God gave us an energized world. He gave us a world through electromagnetism, which comes together and makes things like hydrocarbons that then become oil, natural gas, coal, other things that we can use for our purpose. He put us in dominion over it, and then he told us, hey, this thing is, the system I gave you, it's going to work. You might mess up on a lot of things, but the system I gave you, you don't need to worry, it's going to work. And so could it be that God is actually providing fossil fuels for us, which maybe is one of the reasons why, to give him the benefit of the doubt, why you go back, 100 years ago, and they're saying, we got 30, 40 years left. 30 years later, we got 30 or 40 years left. 30 years later, we got 30 or 40 years left. 30 years later, we got 30 or 40. You know what I'm going to guess they're going to say in 2050 if we're still here? We got 30 or 40 years left. Because maybe the earth is actually reproducing this. Now, there was a theory that came out in the 1970s called peak oil, the point at which you start on the downhill side. But it's one guy's theory that, we got a limited supply. Someday we're going to hit the peak, or we have already hit the peak, and we're down. We're about to use it all up. We got 30 or 40 years left. That's it. If you look it up, all the oil in the world, we used it in 100 years. And now, that was a good run, but now we're done. I think we ought to question the assumptions about that. But with that, let's add a little more biblical perspective. As I already mentioned, I think that a young earth creationist view, and there are some other views. Tomorrow we're going to talk about the gap theory, which could posit some idea that the oil came in some previous dispensation, if you will, prior to that, but we'll look at that tomorrow. But a young earth perspective really is incompatible, I think, with virtually every explanation of where fossil fuel came from. So I kind of wonder why organizations, say like Answers in Genesis, which is a strong young earth creationist organization, why they don't more attack this idea of fossil fuels that came from dinosaurs millions and billions of years ago. They ought to at least, even if they think it's running out, they ought to at least say, quit doing the dinosaur story. This is not where fossil fuels came from. And give a more scientific explanation for that, because even that in of itself, even if you don't believe the earth might be producing, and I'm not going to say it is, I'm going to say, we don't know what takes place deep down within the earth, but all the conditions are right that it could be happening. But even if you don't believe it's happening, you Christians ought to know, don't buy into that dinosaur thing. That is not where oil came from, and coal and gas. And so every Christian who accepts the young earth view should reject the idea that fossil fuels came from rotting animals. That's a biblical worldview, but even if you just want to have, shall we say, a dictionary worldview, everybody who has a dictionary ought to look up fossil and see where it came from. I have learned so many things from studying etymology and realizing, oh, you mean the word used to mean that? It kind of like, how many more years will we be able to sing, "Don we now our gay apparel"? 34 years. Hey, that's a very gay apparel you've got. My guess is the majority of you would not be impressed with that. But, I don't know, Frank, what a gay shirt you have. Well, it's, the word changes. Okay, we know a word changes, and even in our lifetimes or our generations. What about other words? Fossils, for example. Yeah, they indeed do change, and that changes the meaning. So even if you don't have a young earth creationist worldview, you just got a dictionary worldview. You got a worldview that words mean something, and so fossil in this case comes from, I think it's the past participle of fodere, and fodere means to dig. It's a fuel you dug up. So a classic science view, classic science, not agenda science, is supported by biblical instruction and would also require that the current common sense about fossil fuels are relegated to theory and not to fact. Classic science, which is Christian science, believes that we can only see what we can see. That is, science says, well, if you can't see it happening, we don't know if it happened. All we got is a hypothesis, a theory out there. And so classic science ought to say, let's back up on this whole idea of fossil fuels, because that's just a theory. Do things match up with the theory? We can try, but it's a theory. And you and I have what I'm calling this energized creation view, as we proposed last night. And we believe that God has given us a world that is filled with energy at the atomic level, and therefore that we are going to have abundant energy, and that even fossil fuels are possibly a growing resource ready for our use with our dominion, and that we can begin to take that. It is a completely different worldview. But my proposal here is that this energy creation view is a viewpoint that says we have enough energy so that we don't have to create a crisis. We don't have to worry if we're going to have energy 30 or 40 years from now. If we're here 30 or 40 years from now, we're going to have energy, because the world is embedded with energy at its very core, at its atomic level. Now, let's talk about renewable energy. I think that renewable energy, and by here we're not talking about the fossil kind. We're talking, you don't have to dig this up. It comes in other places, wind or water or solar, whatever it is. I think that certainly that is worthy of scientific consideration. There's 1,000 ways to produce energy. let's figure them out. Can we do it cheaply, efficiently, cleanly? Let's make some scientific advancements so that we can do that. I'm not opposed to that at all. And I think as a believer, we don't really care if we heat our house from a coal mine or an oil well or a gas well or a solar panel or a windmill. Energy is energy to us. And we do care about how much does it cost to get it, what kind of impact does it make, what kind of toxins might it put into the air, all those kind of things. Obviously, we care about. But so with that, we also care about governmental constraints that we live under. And so as a believer, we want to have energy. We want to have clean energy. We want to have energy forever. We want to let our grandkids have all the energy they want to have. And we want to have all the energy we want to have. And we believe that God has put government under certain parameters. And if I can put it this way, as I read the Bible, energy policy is not the domain of the government. And we make a tremendous mistake as Christians when we say, let's have government figure out energy for us. Let's have government regulate energy for us. Let's have government. This is a huge mistake that already the cat's out of the bag. And once you give government something, you never get it back, right? And I think that the Christians allowed it to happen. And we see now, as I already said, the chickens come home to roost in eco-tyranny and the things that happen when you give government power, they corrupt that power. Now, renewable energies today require, again, as we mentioned earlier, government subsidies. They just don't work by themselves. If wind power was scientifically to the point where it could provide all the energy that Texas needs, and there's plenty of wind in Texas, right? A lot of hot air, yeah. Boy, indeed. If it could do it economically, well, companies would have stepped in and done it and produced and sold the energy and made a profit, and everybody'd be happy as a lark. Carrying on. But it can't do it right now. Under the science we know now, under the technology we have now, we just can't get enough sustainable energy out of wind. So the government has to come in and subsidize these things. And when government subsidizes, you and I as Christians ought to say, well, wait a minute. First of all, when the government puts money into the economy, what does that do to the value of the dollar? Goes down. So the government comes in and says, hey, Randy, this company is going to charge you $50,000 for solar, but we'll give you $20,000 of it. Oh, wow, what a wonderful thing. So they give me $20,000, I write the check for $50,000, and it boosts the local economy. $50,000 right here we got, ready to spend, pay the employees and all that kind of stuff. Isn't this great? But $20,000 of that was fake money. The government printed it, say, hey, here you go. Now, what does that do to poor Scott over here? Poor Scott didn't get any of that fake money. And poor Scott still has to take the few dollars that he gets in his daily salary, daily wages, and he's got to go buy stuff. Well, the $20,000 of fake money inflated the value of the dollar, didn't it? So you and I ought to say, oh, government subsidies, what a wonderful thing. No, what we ought to say, government subsidies, that robs from the poor. Because that's who it hurts most, is the poor. I'm the rich guy getting $20,000 worth of it. I get a discount on, whatever it is. But the poor person doesn't get anything, and now everything costs more. There's more people wanting a burger down at the burger joint. There's more people putting gas in their charging their new Tesla. There's, whatever it is, and it makes it more expensive. So we ought to look really, I think, at every government subsidy as saying, this is robbing the poor. That's what your government flow of money does. And so for that, we ought to say, wait a minute. I understand you're trying to make electric. I think don't they give you some cash for getting an electric car? Do they still do that? Does anybody know? Got any electric cars out parked in the parking lot there? If so, you're not going to make it home. I think they give a subsidy, $10,000 or something like that. So the car is $60,000 instead of $70,000. Well, again, what's that do? It robs the poor. It inflates the money supply and causes. I should say it causes inflation, and this is a problem. And a believer ought to care about those things. In addition to that, they every now and then they'll come along and say, well, we've got to have a balanced budget. That means we're going to raise taxes, which means we're going to get our $20,000 back. We'll just get it. So, and who pays the taxes? Well, kind of all of us, not just me. It's spread out. So poor Scott over here, sorry, Scott. Poor Scott over here, he's got to pay the taxes. Comes out. And this is a thing which, again, if you are like John Wesley called himself, if you're a lover of humanity and common sense, you got to say, why don't we let the energy companies go research and develop and try to come up with some ways to make renewable energies sustainable, I should say above ground energies, make them sustainable instead of robbing from the poor to make them pay for this. And Christians ought to care about the poor enough, I think, to be able to do that. And Christians then ought to care about freedoms enough to say, give them an inch and they'll take a mile. This is not going to be a thing that we ought to look at. And so I think a believer ought to look and say, I'm not really going to support a policy that is going to be built off the impoverishment of the poorest in our society. That doesn't seem like a Christian thing to do. So drill, baby, drill. I got an abundant supply. It's simple to get. It's clean. It doesn't get any government subsidies. It can come along, and there it is. I think I'm going to go with that until something better comes about. And the truth is that not only do you have this sort of secondhand effect on the poor through inflation and taxation, but there really is a direct impact on the poor in many cases, because renewable energy is often built on the backs of slave labor, literally. Where does the silicone come from for the solar panels? It comes from Chinese slave labor. Where does the lithium come from for your rich man's car battery, right? It comes from literally slave labor. I mean, I'm not talking, they work them like slaves. I'm talking they are slaves. And Christians ought to say, look, this is not the way you treat humanity. And we have other sources of fuel that we can use. And so this is an anti-God, anti-human kind of issue that takes place through all of this. Now, let me give, in the 5 minutes I have left, a challenge to the young, Jedediah, and others. Fuel for burning or for electrical products can come from virtually anything. Let's just talk about electrical generation. We might have mentioned it last night. You wiggle the magnet and you get electricity. That's the way it comes. The electrons are already there. You just gotta push them along somewhere. Make a circuit where they can fly. Put a pretty little positive girl down at the end, and those electrons will run. Go down there. Say, hey, who's down there? You make the circuit. It'll run. You give it a little encouragement. You give it a little movement. Whatever. It all works. We could have some fun doing experiments and seeing how it works. But you can do it from virtually anything. As we talked about last night, some things are going to work better than other things, but you can do it from virtually anything because of protons and electrons. I think Christians ought to recognize this and say, okay, we have been given an energized, atomically energized creation, and the dominion of this creation is ours. And so we want to figure out how can we as Christians who care about the poor and the rich and everybody else, how can we provide the cheapest and the cleanest energy for ourselves and for others? I mean, that's kind of what you want, isn't it? I like we burn mostly wood. We've got plenty of it. The problem is it needs split. Anybody coming up this afternoon? We burn mostly wood. And I like the heat that the wood gives and all that kind of stuff. And for the most part, I like the price, except for some of it. The one thing I don't like about it is kind of makes everything grimy and dirty. And if you burn a fire 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, you end up with... you better paint every now and then. You'll get some of that. Okay, if there was a cheaper, easier, cleaner energy, yeah, I might go for it. I like cheap, clean energy is what I want. So I think we ought to be, we want to provide that for ourselves. We want to provide that for other people. That ought to be a goal, a Christian goal. And so we need some Christians who will come to the table with biblical thinking in regards to energy production. And instead of letting godless people who have rejected the idea of God and an energized earth and a young earth and all the things that we may hold to and value, instead of letting them determine where energy comes from and what energy policy is, we ought to have some Christian scientists who come up and say, we have been given by God an energized world. Now we want to figure out the best way to provide the cleanest, cheapest energy for everybody out there for purposes of prosperity. And so my challenge to the Christian young is consider being a scientist or an inventor who will create energy productions out of the atoms that are all around us. How can you figure it out? By the way, I don't think that means that you got to go to the University of Berkeley, at University of California at Berkeley, and get you a electrical engineering degree or whatever it may. You might do that, but you'll probably be brainwashed in the process. But I think any young man can sit and start looking. Young woman, old man, old woman. Any of us can sit and learn something, right? And most of the advances in technology didn't come from some big corporation. They come from some guy in his living room who was tinkering with something and made it work. And we learn science and we begin to do it. So what I would like is Christians, and especially young Christians, to take this biblical worldview and say, okay, now I've got electricity in this thing. How do I get it and how do I use it? And so begin to work on that. Think about some things like, what if we could grow our own electricity? Well, that's an interesting idea. You actually can, because plants have electrons in them, and they do some photosynthesis, and it gets those electrons running. Is there a way that I don't know. I just think about every now and then, what if the lamp beside my bed was fueled by a plant that I had there, and I just had some electrodes hooked up to it, and there we go. Oh, it's getting dim. I need to water the plant. I'm convinced that the energy is there. We got to figure out how to use it the best. Maybe you say, well, there's not enough energy running through that plant, and maybe we say, okay, well, we got the wrong concept for a light bulb. Then let's figure out a different concept that doesn't take so many electrons jiggling through there. Somebody can figure this out. As a matter of fact, there are companies. There's one company called Plant E. I suppose that's electronic, or I don't know. They're actually working on electrical generation by growing algae. Algae farms, and the algae produces the electron movement. If you can do it out of algae, surely you can figure something out. Get it out of the dirt, whatever you're going to do. There's ways to do this. And so, what if Christians developed a system where really every person was off the grid? I don't need the grid because I produce my own electricity. And it's, not the generator kind. I grow me some algae. I got a 3-inch windmill that it powers the light over the stove, or whatever it is. All these kind of things that you put together. I suspect that, like Robinson Crusoe, we could build a house that was pretty technologically advanced and was not dependent. And if we did it, somebody else would say, hey, that would save me a lot of money. I think I could do that. You just did that out of aluminum foil. I think I can make this happen, and could begin to work. And so I think we need Christians who will come and carry that out. And a church, honestly, and I use that in a broad sense, a church that honors that as a biblical profession. That is something that is brought in such a way that the church says, hey, this is what we need. There was a day, I'm going to use the word church very loosely because this is mostly Catholicism, but there was a day when everything art, everything intellectual, everything science, everything medicine came from the church. And that really did make a huge impact on the world. I don't think you could underestimate the impact that it came. If you were sick, you went to the church, or you went to the monastery. And even in days that we can almost remember, most of us are a little too young for this, but even in days when we can almost remember, if there was a hospital in town, it was because the church started it. That's why you got the Presbyterian hospital, and you got the Baptist hospital, you got the Methodist hospital, why? Because the church said, the poor guy out there who's sick, we ought to be able to help him. It's a biblical worldview. And I think we can get to the place where the church gets back to that and says, hey, you want to know how to be healthy? Come here. You want to know how to make your light bulb over the stove work? Come here. We'll show you how. You want to know how to get yourself out of the huge system that's out there that's got now so many requirements that if you didn't jump when they said jump, you don't get electricity this week. Sorry, not yours. Can we figure this out? Can we make it happen? I think we got some smart Christians around, and it could make it happen, and really would change the world if we viewed energy as a part of the biblical worldview. If we put those together, then it could change the world. And with that, I'm 3 minutes over time, but I was 5 minutes early last night, so it averages out. I hope you had fun on this Saturday morning, and the rather unusual view again of things that we have taken. Tomorrow we are going to go into still some Genesis 1 things, but we're going to talk about. I haven't decided which order I'm going to do this in. I'll see. We're going to talk about the gap theory, and we're going to talk about the flat Earth theory. And look at Genesis 1 and see if we can figure out anything about the gap theory and the flat earth theory, and put some thinking on that. So that should be a fun morning too. 9:45 in the morning for all that. And then we got potluck lunch. That'll energize you. Let's have a word of prayer. Father, make in us and in this conference a spark that lights up in someone's mind and thinking, and perhaps could even create a movement of those who bring the energy that you have already given us in this world, and bring some sanity to energy thinking and energy policy, and really an entire shift. Because we know that if we're not careful, dear Heavenly Father, there are days coming in which the government is literally going to tell us when we can have water and when we can't have water, when we can have electricity and when we can't have electricity, when we can drive and when we can't drive. And we believe this is far out of bounds of government, biblical government, dear Heavenly Father. And we desire a world that is biblical and operates based upon biblical principles. We also know, dear Heavenly Father, that it is the poor, the hungry, the hurting that are most affected by this path that we're on now. And so may we as Christian thinkers bring bring some alternative thinking to the table, bring some common sense to the table, because indeed we are lovers of mankind and of common sense. And we pray that you would foster that within us even more. In Jesus' name, amen. God bless you all. Have a good afternoon. Thank you for being with us online. Thanks for joining us as well.